All right. Welcome, ladies, to this episode of the Joyful Scaling Podcast. I'm here today with Sarah Simons, and I'm so excited. Sarah is an author of a book called Designing a Life from House to Haven. She's a blogger. Her blog is called Grace in My Space, and this is where I found her, as you'll learn in just a few minutes. She is an interior stylist. She's a DIY adventurer. She's a small business owner. She's got a master's in business management, and she's a former director of digital marketing. She has been featured on the cover of American Farmhouse Style magazine, and her blog is award-winning. She's focused on building her six-figure brand with Christian principles, so you know I'm all over that, to help guide her readers towards creating a home that is built on the one that matters, Jesus Christ. One truly extraordinary lady here. Let's welcome Sarah to the show.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Thanks so much, hon. Well, today we're talking about self-care from a biblical perspective. And so before you and I dive in, I just want to kind of set the stage and give some background as to how I even found you, Sarah. So self-care is a term that is so out there these days. Everybody's talking about it. And a couple of weeks ago in my quiet time on a Sunday morning, I believe, I was doing some prayer time. And I said, Lord, I need to get what this is to you. So I did a Google search to find out more, because that term never felt good to me. Like, self is the root of all sin. And so when I see that word attached to something, I literally get a visceral reaction, like major red flags go up. So when I did my Google search, Sarah's blog came up, addressing self-care from a decidedly biblical perspective. And I thought, thank you, Jesus. I have to get Sarah on the podcast. So Sarah, thanks so much for being here. Tell us, how did this issue of self-care come up for you when you blogged about it?
Very much in the same way that what you just described. You were looking at it for your own personal life, and so was I. And this was a couple of years ago that I did that series. And I really just wanted to be able to communicate it to my followers in a way that was not cultural. I wanted it to be biblical. And everything that you see and hear is very, very cultural in the fact that it's usually more selfish. It's usually all about me, and it's just not something that jives with biblical principles. And so when I started looking into it, I kind of said to the Lord, I'm just going to look at the book of Matthew. I know that the Bible has lots to say about this topic. And I know I could find verses throughout the entire Bible, but I just want to look at one book because I wanted to follow Jesus's life and see how he interacted with self-care.
I love it.
So that's what I did. I just read through the book of Matthew. I pulled things specifically from that book to look at how Jesus handled self-care. And then I wrote about it for my blog series. And it's interesting because, self-care, the word itself, it's very made up in our own society. It's not a biblical term. So it's not like you can search in the Bible, okay, Lord, show me all your verses on self-care, because it's just not that simple. And so you have to kind of dive into it. You have to dissect what Jesus is saying and what he's doing, and just really use our own common sense to see how it relates to us biblically.
Yes, yes. And you began your blog series by being very vulnerable. And I so appreciated that. You admitted that you neglect self-care and you allow stress at times to consume you without even recognizing it. And then you talk about something I talk about a lot, which is we ladies have a lot of negative self-talk.
Yes.
And you specifically mentioned these were your negative self-talk points. You're like, I failed at reading the Bible this week. I gained 10 pounds last year. And I can't seem to find balance. And I want to really land here. You note that we put pressure on ourselves, crazy high expectations, wanting more, and not being content. So I'd love you to speak to that. Like, what can we as Christian women do when we're feeling put upon with all this pressure to keep up?
Absolutely. I mean, it sounds like a cookie cutter Sunday school answer, but go to the Lord in prayer. Through my entire series, the overarching takeaway that I had from the study that I did was that self-care from a biblical perspective is ensuring that we are taking our relationship with the Lord and putting it at our top priority so that we can have ourselves filled up, so that we can be bolstered and encouraged. And then we can take our own improvement in our lives and use that to help and to serve others. And that is basically, the overarching self-care from a biblical perspective. And when we're feeling that really heavy laden, burdened, one woman show kind of situation, that's when we need to get away, seek solitude with the Lord, and really press into that specific component of self-care.
Right. And so for me, I so love that, because for me, when I see self-care out there, it's like, and even my coach earlier in the week, she goes, Jude, you got to go get the facial.
Yeah.
You've got to get the massage. You've got to go soak in a tub. And I'm just like, and she's not Christian, so God love her. She's awesome. And I truly love her. And she's been amazing for me and my business and my growth. But if you're not focused on Christ, you're missing the mark, because you can feel stressed out and go for a moment and get relaxation or relief from the back massage. But to me, I know when I'm not right with the Lord, because my whole life just feels jambled. It's just not right.
Absolutely. I mean, in Matthew 4, Jesus he'd just gone through his 40 days of no food, and he is hungry, and the Lord allows Satan to come and to tempt him. And Satan says, look, let's just give you some bread. We'll turn it into bread. And he's like, but man can't live on bread alone. Everything that is good comes from the mouth of the Lord. And so that's just speaking to what you just said so perfectly. We tend in our culture, in our society, to go for those really basic needs. I need to eat better. I need to get more sleep. I need to take more relaxing vacations, a facial, whatever the case may be. But Jesus is like, look, those things, they're great and we need them. We do. But that's not how you live. You live by the mouth of the Lord. And that's just getting into the word, getting into prayer, being in community with other believers who can bolster you and encourage you and help bear some of those burdens. And it all plays a really big part in your spiritual maturity, and then how you can, fill your own cup and then go out and serve others.
Yes, I love that. And your blog article came at the end of a year, looking forward into the new year. So you were talking about goals as you were entering the new year, and how they need to be reflective of biblical truths and the important things we need to be focusing on. And so this is exactly kind of the point, that the cultural expectations of what gives you rest isn't really what gives you rest. Absolutely. And, I often tell myself and my kids, because my kids are built like me, ever ready, just keep go, go, go. But we need to be refreshed in the Lord. And that doesn't necessarily come just on Sundays. We need to be even momentarily refreshed by him. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh yeah. I mean, there's verses, that say pray continually. And when people hear something like that, I think that they end up thinking, okay, I've got to get away. I've got to get in my prayer closet, or whatever the term that you want to use is, be in solitude and be in deep prayer for hours upon end, right? And that's not what it means. It just means being in this really easy, communicative relationship with the Lord, where when you're going through your busy day and you're like, oh gosh, I need a minute, and being able to take literally 1 minute and say, Lord, this is where I'm at. This is what I need. Fill me. And the Spirit will do that. And he'll give you that strength to keep going. And it's just really it's a relationship. And I know that's kind of a cliche saying for Christians, but it really is. It's all about just being able to take that moment and going to the Lord and saying, okay, he already knows, right? He already knows that we need him. And so please, Lord, lift me up, fill me up, and he will. And it's just really, it's a really sweet, sweet relationship that he allows us to have.
Yes. Amen. And so I'm a big proponent of this word decide. Like, we get to choose, not just day by day or hour by hour, but minute by minute. Like, we get to decide if we're going to let faith rule over fear,
Mhm.
or if we're going to let stress rule over peace. And so I just always picture, and I love telling my kids this, reminding them and reminding myself, picture Jesus with his hands open in front of you at any moment. And he says, you want peace? Here you go. You want joy? Here you go. And his is the real deal. So I love that. But I know that many of us struggle with this idea that it is selfish, even ungodly, to even entertain this idea of self-care. But we know that, and I love how you talk about this in your blog, that Jesus took care of himself. So I want to talk about that model, his example of taking great care of ourselves.
Absolutely. Yeah, Jesus was, well, he was the master of taking care of himself, right? Because he's the master of all things. But he did such an amazing job of setting a great example for his disciples and for his followers, because in so many passages, he took time to get away. He would go up on a hilltop and just really key in on some intentional solitude with the Lord. And that, I think, is so restorative when we're able to take the time and just block out all of the distractions, turn off social media, especially social media, turn off, the TV, turn off, stop looking at magazines, whatever else is cluttering our minds and kind of competing with the Lord. Just get rid of those distractions and have some really serious, intentional time of solitude so that you can hear the Lord's voice. And he was a very great example of that, to say to his followers, look, I've been meeting your needs all day long. I've healed you. I have fed you. I have done all of these things for you. And he still took the time for himself. And that's, I think, the part where a lot of people tend to say, well, it's selfish to take care of myself because X, Y, and Z. But at the same time, if we're not caring for ourselves and we're not filling ourselves spiritually, we're not going to have anything left, because we are humans and we have limits. And those are something that we need to recognize and be okay with, and move forward knowing that you're going to be a better person for others when you are filled up spiritually. And even when you've taken care of yourself from a health perspective, there's nothing wrong with exercise. There's nothing wrong with eating well or taking time for actual just rest. There's nothing wrong with that. It's when people tend to take it further to this really great extreme of selfishness that it can turn into something that's not biblical.
Yes. And I'm going to address that in just a moment. I want to go deeper on a foundational point that you note in your blog. And I want to make sure we hit on it here. In Matthew 6:25-34, where it begins, don't worry about your life, what you will eat or drink and all that, how you will be clothed and all that. But the last verse in that passage, but seek ye first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you. And you state that this is the foundational activity of self-care, because then all of our necessities are freely given from that. So as a practical matter, can we throw out some practical to-dos, even though I don't like that word, let's think of something else, activities that we really need to do on an ongoing basis in order to make sure that we're pointed in the right direction, our eyes are on Christ, and we're seeking his kingdom. Because I just want to, before you answer, I just want to set this up for you in that a lot of my listeners, they are entrepreneurs, 6 figures, multi-6 figures. They want to get to 7 figures, not because of the money, but because of the impact. So they're feeling put upon. They may not be working as efficiently as maybe they could. They got to get the systems in, but they're feeling overwhelmed. And they're like, when you think about time, they're like, oh gosh, I don't have any time. I'm barely getting 5 hours sleep. So as a practical matter, thinking of the woman like that's listening, seek ye first the kingdom and his righteousness. Tell us some practical tips on that.
I think that a lot of that, and I'm no expert in this, right? Like I struggle with this whole concept, just like every other woman does who's trying to do it all and be it all. And I think that a lot of it tends to come down to the realistic expectations that we have for ourselves from a spiritual standpoint. Because while let's just take a step back and look at different things. Say you're really into fashion and that's the business that you're trying to grow. There's nothing wrong with that until it becomes vanity, right? Mm-hmm. Say you're really into home decor, like myself. That's what my blog is based around. There's nothing wrong with that until it turns into envy and jealousy. You're into entrepreneurship and building your brand and building your business. There's nothing wrong with that until it turns into an idol. But so there's always this balance that you have to have in your life, no matter what your business is, no matter if you're a stay-at-home mom or you're, somebody who's famous in the public eye constantly. It doesn't matter what it needs to be. What's my intent in what I'm doing? Am I seeking the Lord and his kingdom in my actions? And he will bless it. He really will. If your intentions are for him, then he is going to bless that effort. And part of that is that daily practice of being in the word, of being on your knees in prayer, of having that conversational prayer life with the Lord and just saying, and part of that is, for busy women who really don't feel like they have the time. Number one, you need to make the time, right? You need to make the time to be with the Lord. That will benefit you more than any other organizational structure you can put into place or hiring the right person to help you with your business, whatever the case may be. Make the time, be with the Lord, communicate with him, listen to his voice, because he's not going to guide you wrong. And that is just such an intentional practice of discipline, really, because we all feel like we don't have time and we all feel like we're going to benefit from doing X, Y, and Z rather than being with the Lord and doing that portion of self-care. Mm-hmm. And I think that sometimes it's just about, it can even be about multitasking. If you are looking for ways to get God into your life more often, then listen to a sermon while you're running, or turn on a podcast while you're driving in the car from place to place. Something that's just really practical is having that 10, 15 minutes or more set aside in the morning as soon as you wake up. Get right into the Bible and have that be the first thing that fills your mind before you open up email, before you open up social media, whatever the case may be. And then throughout the day, you can just intersperse those other resources that we have available to us so easily on those off moments when you're going from one thing to the next, or you have the brain capacity to do something while you're listening to a great resource.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Wow, that is such great practical insight. Thank you for that. And I think sometimes, and you mentioned it in the blog, sometimes we just overcomplicate what the Christian walk looks like.
We do.
And it's like you mentioned earlier, I've got to spend 30 minutes devoted to the prayer closet. And if I don't, I'm a loser. I'm not, I wonder if I'm saved, as opposed to God just saying, come to me, and occasionally throw up the help me God, because I'm overwhelmed. But when you can, and when you devote the time to study his word, I always feel better. And I just went live yesterday to say that, hey, ladies, it's too easy to excuse why we can't do this or that, but it's really about putting it in the calendar, saying, this is a priority. There's nothing more important than the Lord God. So I love that. All right, let's talk about, time's going so quickly. I want to go to your fourth point that I saw in your blog, which is we ladies tend to not want to ask for help.
Yeah.
And, we're the kind of people that we just do it all. And it's so easy to overextend ourselves. I can't say no. We fall into that rabbit hole of busyness. Mm-hmm. But you talk about, hey, let's look at how Jesus handled busyness. So let's talk about that for a moment.
Yeah, absolutely. If you look at Jesus's life, all he did was serve, right? He was healing people. He was feeding people. He was amassing crowds to teach. And so, a lot of times I think people think, well, Jesus can't relate to my struggle because the times were so different. But really, he was under demand from so many people, from the government, from his followers, from his own purpose, just being the Son of God and knowing what he had to do. Yeah. And So he was busy, right? I mean, we can very easily say that. But what he did is he saw this massive crowd, and he knew that one person, I mean, he knew that he could do it easily, right? He could have easily said, there's 5,000 people here. I'm going to feed them all. I'm going to send them on their way to his disciples. And he just said, look, guys, we need to pray for workers because there is a lot of need and you are going to need help. And he set that great example for them so that once he was gone, they would have the help that they need, because he knew that one person or 12 people couldn't do it on their own. And I think that that's just such a great example of just having that self-awareness and wisdom to say, I might be able to do it all, but I shouldn't. I should ask for help. And that's something that so many of us, I think, we tend to look at it as a weakness. But really, when we're asking for help, we're bringing in people who have different skills than we do, who have different strengths and talents than we do. And it can be a really amazing team when you do that, and when you ask for help, and when you build the right group of people around you to go out and serve the Lord together for more impact.
Yeah, and that is so important. And just as Jesus was gracious enough to allow humans to be a part of his miracles, hey, go fill these urns up with water. He didn't need them to do that, obviously, but I just love how he blesses us by bringing us into the miracles that he did in many cases. And so likewise, you know, we shouldn't be afraid to reach out to someone who could help, because they probably would love it. Think about it. Ladies listening, don't you feel great when you help a friend? Don't you feel needed and really good when someone says, hey, I know you're really good at this. Can you please help me with this? I mean, even if you're busy, we just talked about it. We got to be careful about this, but in any event, just being asked feels good. And then when we can serve, we feel good. So let's not take the blessing away from another person who stands ready to help and would love to help and be blessed absolutely by it. So, all right, let's end here. What is the purpose of self-care? And you reference Matthew 23, 25, and 26. Do you want me to read it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Woe to you. This is Jesus talking to the Pharisees, right? Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites. And depending on what translation, they could say other things there, but it's just an ugly, ugly word, right? Yes. For you clean the outside of the cup and the plate, but inside they're full of greed and self-indulgence. You blind Pharisee, first clean the inside of the cup and plate, that the outside also may be clean. I mean, obviously Jesus strips the outward appearance and he looks at the heart. And Jesus is saying, first take care of you in order to take care of anybody else. So let's elaborate on that. It's biblical view of self-care right there.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, what can you just imagine him saying that to the Pharisees? I like to imagine the people's reaction. And the Pharisees were pompous and they were, hoity-toity. And so I can only imagine the shock that was on their face. But really, that's what they were doing. They were concerned about their prestige. They were concerned about their position. They were concerned about the money that they were bringing in. And they were amping up their biblical place in society.
Oh, yeah.
But they were not serving the people. And Jesus can see through that so quickly. And he's just saying, look, you can polish yourselves up. You can wear fancy clothes. You can get a facial. You can do your nails. You can do all of these things that make you feel good. But if the inside is trash and it's not anything that is loving or joyous or any of the fruits of the Spirit, then you're not going to serve your purpose. And Jesus has given us a purpose to be salt and light. And that is the thing that we need to focus on for self-care, because, he says, if we lose our saltiness, then it's worth nothing more than to be trampled under our feet. And so we have to continually restore that flavor and in our own being, be in very solid relationship with the Lord in order to serve others and to fulfill our purpose. And I think that that is something that so many people tend to look over. They think, I need to fill myself up. I need to care for myself, self-care, 101, so that I can be better. But it's actually about being better for other people and for serving your God-given purpose.
Wow. That is a mouthful right there. I mean, that'll be one of our audio clips because it's too darn good. I mean, and it's so basic, right? I mean, we heard this. I was raised to the church. You very well may have been raised to the church as well. And it's like so basic, right? We're serving others. That's our goal. And somehow with the world, the culture, it tries to get into what we know is right. And then so many people are doing it. We're like, oh, am I doing this wrong? Oh, okay. That's why I'm tired, because I didn't get my massage this week, So that's just so awesome that we are commissioned to serve others. We are commissioned to tell others the truth, capital T. So that's exhausting work, especially right now with the spiritual battles that we see going on all around us.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, I often think about this, Sarah, like if we could only see the spiritual battle, I think we'd all be like freaking out.
I know. It would be very scary. It would be.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, our time is just about up, but I want to wrap this up. One of the things you say is, in tying it all together in your blog, we cannot serve others without filling our own life with God's restorative rest, and his rest you can't get anywhere else, right? By going to the Bible, seeking that biblical wisdom of the Lord and seeking his kingdom, being very intentional and focused on that precious time with him as well. So any thoughts maybe to that we haven't talked about, anything on your heart right now that you feel led to share in particular on this issue?
I think the other part of that, because we focused a lot on relationship with the Lord, and obviously that comes first, but I think the other part of it is relationship with other believers. There is so much to be said for bearing one another's burdens, like we're told to do in the Bible. There is so much to be said for having a community around you to bounce ideas off of, to have just time to rest and be with a friend. And just, God didn't create us to be alone, right? Like that's why he gave Adam Eve. And so when we're trying to do everything on our own, that's when it's going to feel the most burdensome. And so I do think that the other element of it is just getting into a really solid community of believers. Maybe it's a church, maybe it's a small group, maybe it's just one individual that you're mentoring with or discipling with. Whatever the case may be, everybody has a different personality and will fit differently with a different situation. So find that person or people that can bolster you and that you can bolster in return. Everybody has their own gifts that they can bring to the situation, and just really dive into self-care and restorative rest with a community as well. And that's just really helpful, so that we're not, everybody feels alone at some point, and you don't want that to be the case when you're trying to seek the Lord.
Love that. That is so important. I think especially as women, because we're so relational,
Yes,
that if we allow ourselves to sit in isolation, kind of like head down and grinding and hustling, like, a lot of the gurus say we need to do, which I say, no, you don't. Go to the Lord instead and let him be your CEO. When we're just focused on him, and when we're around sisters in Christ in particular, there is nothing more uplifting than that. So, all right, let me ask you this. This is called the Joyful Scaling Podcast. So tell us what brings you joy in your business.
It's always been helping the other women to learn more about how they can create a haven in their home, because so many times people get stuck, they get stuck in, I don't know what to do. And so they're just paralyzed. And so for me, homemaking has been something that I've just loved for years now. And it wasn't something that was innate in me. It wasn't something that was a skill that I had on my own. I had to develop it, and I had to learn a lot along the way. So I love being able to take that side of it and say to other women, look, this wasn't something that was natural to me. I learned how to do it, and you can too. And just walking them through that process, that gives me so much joy, just to see their realization, like, oh, I can do that. And then they have confidence and they have encouragement to move forward. And that's really special.
Yes, it sure is. That's beautiful. So where can our listeners plug into you? Where can they find you and your book? I know your book and your YouTube channel is out there. Let's talk about where we can find you.
Absolutely. So my home base is graceinmyspace.com for my blog. And then from there, Grace in My Space is my handle for all my social channels, Instagram, Facebook, Pinterest, and also YouTube, which I am just launching really. I've only been doing it for a few months, but it's a really fun addition. I do heart chats over on YouTube where I do kind of biblical studies that are just, kind of like this, a heartfelt chat where I'm just talking about a topic or a verse or a passage that the Lord's brought to me. And so that's a lot of fun. And then, yes, my book, Designing a Life from House to Haven, is available on Amazon. And that is really a very scaled down version of how you can take 10 simple steps and just breaks it down really simply and turn your house into a haven. And it just walks you through goal setting and, mood board creation and all the things that some people find really intimidating.
That sounds great. And we'll make sure to have all of those links in the show notes. I'm curious about your heart chats. Are they lives that happen on a regular basis, like every Tuesday or every something that we can make sure to attend?
I'm not doing them live. They're just pre-recorded, but then they'll go up on my YouTube channel every week.
Okay, good. I'm sorry, I misunderstood. I didn't know if that was like a live event. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to put that in my calendar because I know it would be such a great thing. All right. Well, beautiful.
Maybe I should make it one. That would be fun.
Yes. Oh my goodness. And ladies, as I said, I found Grace on the blog, but I've been following her on Instagram at Grace in My Space. You've got to get over there and check it out. Well, Grace, thank you so much for being here. Such an incredible conversation.
Thank you for having me.
You are so welcome. Ladies, if you've enjoyed this episode, please take a moment, leave a rating and a review. It means so much to us. Let me know what other topics you'd like me to cover, other guests you'd like to see on the show, because I'm here to serve you. So thanks so much for listening, and we will see you next time.